One, two, three, four.
Hello, you're listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast series. We are a general interest independent bookstore located in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. This year, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we've had to close our store and cancel in-person events. But SKYLIT is your neighborhood bookstore, and we are finding ways to create community even while we're far apart. In the coming weeks, we'll be putting out lots of new audio content to help you discover new books, connect with authors, and check in with your favorite booksellers. To learn more about how you can help keep SKYLIT alive, please visit our website at skylitbooks.com or check out our social media accounts on Twitter and Instagram. You can subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you for listening and enjoy.
Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back to SKYLIT. This is the SKYLIT Books podcast series where we bring you conversations from authors all over the place into your headphones, into your room, into your car, into your daily walks, wherever you may be in the world right now. Today we have a fantastic conversation with two playwrights, Sarah Ruhl and Rachel Kauder Nalebuff. I'm going to give them their full introductions in just a moment, but we're so excited to have them on. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah and Rachel.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Maddie.
I just wanted to give a quick shout out. If you haven't already checked out our events on our Crowdcast page, we're doing a full virtual event schedule over at crowdcast.io/skylitbooks. We've got lots of good stuff coming up for the rest of July and August, which you can check out now. You can also watch replays of all of our past events. They are there on that page. You can see the whole video, you can see the chat, you can pretend you were there, you can pour yourself a cocktail and act like you are in the room with us. So we hope you check that out. Again, that's crowdcast.io/skylitbooks. All of our events are absolutely free to attend and to replay. All right, so without further ado, I will introduce today's guests. Sarah Ruhl's plays include In the Next Room or The Vibrator Play, which was a Pulitzer Prize finalist and Tony Award nominee. The Clean House, which is also a Pulitzer Prize finalist and winner of the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize. Passion Play, A Cycle, winner of the PEN American Award. Dead Man's Cell Phone, winner of the Helen Hayes Award. And most recently, Stage Kiss and Dear Elizabeth. She has been the recipient of a MacArthur Fellowship, the Helen Merrill Emerging Playwrights Award, the Whiting Writers Award, the Penn Center Award for a Mid-Career Playwright, the Feminist Press's 40 Under 40 Award, and the 2010 Lilly Award. She is currently on the faculty at Yale School of Drama and lives in Brooklyn, New York with her family. Rachel Kauder Nalebuff is a writer working in performance and oral history. She is the editor of the New York Times bestselling My Little Red Book, an anthology of people's first period stories, co-editor of the Feminist Utopia Project, a collection of essays and art that imagine a better future, and author of Stages, coming out from Thick Press this year, a hybrid collection of writing and interviews with end-of-life care workers that feels truly revolutionary in both form and content. That's according to Elif Boutman, author of The Idiot. She directs Three Hole Press, a small press for performance works in printed formats. Rachel also runs a memoir program for seniors with Caitlin Ryan O'Connell and many friends through the Bushwick Star and the New York City Department of Aging. She's also a lecturer in the English department at Brooklyn College. I just want to put in my own little personal plug. I loved Stages. I think it's one of the best books I've read this year. It really moved me in a deep and lasting way. And I've just been thinking a lot about it as we're kind of entering this new era of mutual aid and care work. We're shifting, our economy's shifting into something hopefully better and more humanist. And I think this book is one of those books that kind of shows us the way. So I'm really excited to hear this conversation today. All right, so without further ado, I'm gonna go away and I'm gonna let Rachel and Sarah take it away.
If I could just jump in really quickly and say how much I agree with you, Maddie, about what a beautiful book Stages is and how it couldn't be more relevant. It's funny, but I haven't been able to read from start to finish many books in quarantine, I think because of the urgency of the state of the world. But this was one book that I read in one or two sittings, and I think because of exactly what you described about care and about authenticity and about how we reveal the personal through service. Uh, because I think service is on all of our minds, and also we're looking at the nursing home in a completely different way now. Hopefully, I mean, hopefully, um, in the way that this book does, the invisible is becoming more visible.
Maddie and Sarah, thank you so much. Yeah, I feel a desire to also thank the people who were involved in Stages because um, it is a collaboration. Stages is a kind of hybrid genre book that combines interviews that I conducted with end of life care workers at a nursing home alongside my own writing. And one of the reasons I'm so grateful to be talking with you today, Sarah, is to just think together and talk together about what it means to make a collaborative work. But yeah, I was thinking it might be nice to just read the names of the people who I interviewed as kind of, I know both of us think about rituals, but just as a way to begin, because I think their words changed me and I wish they could be here with us today. So I'm just going to say thank you, Edna, Melody, George, Jennifer, Rabbi Hirschhorn, John, Agnes, Caitlin, Carisha, Glendalee, Sharon, Chanel, Daniel, Mojdi, Nicholas, Joy, Anne, and Rosa.
Can I ask? I love that you start with that ritual. Are they all still with us in the world?
It's such a good question. And I think one of the things that's been very hard and, yeah, I think challenging about releasing this book is I don't know. I actually don't know. Yeah, I haven't been able to reach anyone at the nursing home. A lot of their communication has been shut down. But I also teach at senior centers, which Maddie mentioned, and the the rate of loss there is really staggering. And it's been interesting. There was like that New York Times expose that talked about how 1/3 of deaths in the US have occurred in nursing homes, and that I believe also includes nursing home workers, but there are no stats about nursing home workers themselves. There are stats about the rates of residents. So it feels just like such a weight and to not know. But yeah, I pray for that invocation is also a prayer. Yeah, totally.
Um,
Um,
it's also interesting when you talk about the New York Times kind of portal into the world of nursing homes. I feel like a lot of what I've read is about exposés of nursing home abuse during this time or the kind of horrible stories of abandonment. But what I saw in your book was such um, care from these workers towards their patients and residents, and a real sense of calling and vocation. You know, that it wasn't just a job for them, but was really they were attracted to the idea of helping people enter a time before death, and in quite a spiritual way. So I also found that to be wonderfully healing to read at a time when um, human nature itself seems sort of under question.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's been something that's been such a frustrating spin and emphasis, I think, on the news lately. I think it started that story first made its way to me from this like tragedy in Spain, I think, where there was like pretty much an abandoned nursing home, and versions of that story started happening here. And for me, that narrative is so much less about the like betrayal and negligence of nursing home staff, and much more about what happens when we fully abandon caring for our care workers. One of the reasons that the rate of illness and death in nursing homes has been so high is that nursing homes are so understaffed.
Right.
Like, one thing that was so striking to me about this book was I conducted these interviews 2 years ago, and this is at a relatively well-resourced nursing home. And even then, people felt so pressed for time, and that they couldn't, you have to do the same amount of work every day, and you can't really take time to grieve and to feel and to process the losses that are a part of your everyday. And if there wasn't time for that then, I cannot imagine what is happening now. I mean, yeah, it's I know some people haven't been able to read the stories of what's going on in the nursing homes, but the details are pretty horrifying in terms of what staff have to do to try to treat people. And I've been thinking a lot about how I wonder if there will be a future where we can have basically care for care workers, like trauma support for everyone who's been on the front lines, which has always been necessary. Like, that's one thing that I feel like Stages in those interviews really brings up, and was sort of a position I inadvertently found myself in as a playwright embedded in this staff resilience group. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm suddenly the social worker, even though I'm sure you've been in that place too, Sarah. I feel like as playwrights and as researchers, witness is so therapeutic, but I was like, wow, witness needs to be a part of working in a hospital, in a nursing home. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what you say about caring for the caretakers. I mean, I think our economy can be so brutal that there's barely enough time and attention paid to caretaking, much less to, sorry, I don't know what that is, much less to caring for the caretakers. And my husband is a psychiatrist, and he's been starting a podcast lately where he's talking to frontline workers who've been in the ER in New York. And I was listening to his first conversation, which is with an ER doctor who's a good friend of ours. And she said, I didn't even want to talk about my experiences to anyone, because I didn't want the stories to be sensationalized or taken out of context. She felt she'd been a witness to these people who died, and she didn't really want to share the trauma of that. And it was really hard to speak about. And she spoke about it with Tony because he was a friend. But I think we're going to see such a level of trauma for the people who've been caring for people the past year. It's staggering, and how art can help us with catharsis and witness and service. I think I think your book is a wonderful portal in for people who want to do that kind of work.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I was reading letters from Max, and really, I think a part of the book that hit me today was just this conversation you two had about just about the role of art, but yeah, what is art's function? And you say, like, maybe all art is in some way helpful, and or ought to be. And Max says, well, maybe all art is already helpful because it's not war, basically.
Says that.
And maybe it can distract us from extraction and killing each other, and that's also so important. And I guess I just wonder where you are at with that question right now, because even though I made this book and maybe it feels clear to others, like the past couple months have been yeah, I feel like I keep using this metaphor, like I'm in a centrifuge, like I'm just like, I feel like I'm in the mud about how writing can be useful.
Service, yeah, yes. It's a centrifuge. I mean, first I might just give the listener a little context about the book, and also how the book came to be, and how you are in the book too. So this book, Letters from Max, is a book I co-wrote with a former student, Max Ritvo, who was a really brilliant poet who was taking a playwriting class of mine at Yale, and Rachel was in the class too. And we all got to know each other. And Max had a pediatric cancer called Ewing sarcoma, and he was in remission at the beginning of the class. And by the end of the class, he'd had a recurrence and was no longer in remission. And Max and I became quite close, particularly after graduation and when he was in clinical trials, and he moved to New York to get an MFA in poetry at Columbia. So we wrote letters back and forth, while he got his poetry MFA, while he got married, while he had all kinds of, adventures in his life. And we'd always planned to make a book of them together, and then talked about different arrangements of the letters. And then Max died. I'm so bad with years. He died when he was 24, so that was how many years ago now?
I remember learning about it when I started Brooklyn College, because it was like that day. It was my first day, so I think it was 2016, the fall of 2016.
That's right. He never saw Trump elected, which we were all...
Right. Right.
That's right. Yeah. And in fact, the anniversary of his death is coming up. It's in August. But my God, my daughter put some alarm on her phone. I just have to turn it off. Said that, I think what's interesting putting Letters from Max in a conversation with stages is, like you, who started the conversation with a ritual of the names of the collaborators. When I sign books for Letters from Max, I always find myself wanting to not sign for Max, because that doesn't feel right. But I circle his name and I make a little light rays around it, just so I have a sense that there are two authors, even though Max isn't here to sign. And I think also what the books share in my mind is this kind of unfolding of relationship that is in real time, that some art concocts a facsimile of that in narrative, but in this case, they just were authentically unfolding in real time, and then a little artifact was made and shared.
I love that. It makes me think of Maria Irene Fornes's work, and she was a Cuban American playwright who did she teach Paula Vogel, or I feel like you taught in a way that was influenced by, you studied with her.
Yeah. But
amazing.
Paula knew her too, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when I first encountered her work firsthand, I was like, I know you. It must be through my teachers. But I wasn't sure exactly of the lineage. But I feel like there was such an aha moment encountering her theory of drama, where she says something like, drama doesn't have to come from conflict. It can come from people knowing one another, and the outside world is enough drama. Something like that. And I feel like, yeah, your book has so much velocity because we are witnessing such a deep connection that is so honest and vulnerable. And I feel like I felt compelled to bring myself to the story of stages because everyone at the nursing home was so vulnerable with me.
Mhm.
And the book actually first started as a performance that the nursing home staff performed at a cathedral. I was hired by this nursing home to make a play with the staff. Um, but there was something about that performance that actually felt like it was missing to me, which was that, not that the play needed to be about me, but that I felt that it wasn't fully complete because nothing is ever neutral, you know. I had strung their words together, and I had been so changed by their words, and a book felt like a way to show up.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I didn't really imagine it would be a book until after the performance was over, and I was like, oh, this is the beginning.
Mm.
And there's much more from this one event that needs to be shared. I mean, I feel like that's always kind of a frustrating thing with plays and performances, is like, I mean, it's beautiful, but there's such a limited moment when those words can be heard. But yeah, with this book, it felt like the nursing home workers' words, I really wanted them to be heard by many more people, and people who wouldn't be able to make it to a church for a variety of reasons, but also that like my work wasn't done.
Mhm.
Um, and I wonder for you with letters from Max, I mean, in the book, you talk about how you decided that you would want your letters to be bound together and with a string, but I guess I'm really curious to learn more about the process, especially the narrative voice that you have that's sort of dedicated to the reader.
Yeah, I have like 1,000 thoughts about what you just said. And one thing I love about the fact that you chose to include yourself in stages is there are two narratives at work. You know, there's this play that's about to happen, then there's you in it. There's the narrative of doubt and self-doubt, which I love. And and there's process. And I think for so many people in the theater, what we love is the process and being in the room and being in the rehearsal room, and the audience is sort of irrelevant. So I love
Yes.
that the book is sneak into this process, even though, actually in a more intimate way, in a certain way than if you even had come to see the play, because you don't actually get to see the process when you see a production. They're very different. And I, as a playwright, I'm always a little bereft when the process ends and the thing becomes a performance. But in terms of Fornes, I was really intrigued by what you said about how she rejects a dramaturgy of conflict, and you talked about the velocity in letters from Max being a coming to know one another. And I think that's such a beautiful idea, that plot can be as simple as a coming to know, and that there is great beauty in people coming to know each other. That is a story, as much as people kind of slinging mud around and insulting each other, which I think sometimes is what passes for the idea of conflict in American theater. And I'm not thinking of any particular play, but just a drama of a quarrelsome drama as opposed to deep conflict. Anyway, but you asked about the narrative voice and letters from Max, which I had self-doubt about inserting myself too into that narrative, because there was a kind of purity in it just being our letters. But I think because the narrative was in some ways unfinished, because Max died, and because he wasn't there to arrange the letters with, it did feel like there was an empty space for how I was arranging them, what was between the letters chronologically, what came after, what the grief was like after he left. Um, and it was hard to write. It was sad and lonely to write. Um,
Hmm.
but I'm it also was joyful because I got to um, talk to Max some more.
It made me think so much. I mean, it was wild to return to this phrase of Max's, which I had heard, I guess, several years ago from his poetry. He came up with this phrase, lyric complicity,
Yes.
which is so beautiful. Which could you kind of describe what it is, Sarah? I think you've probably thought about it a little more than I have.
Well, he has a poem that's like a little bit of a joke. It's like lyric complicity for one, lyric complicity, and I can't quote it exactly, but I remember when he was in that playwriting class, he kind of, I don't know if he'd already invented the phrase, but he kind of came out with it. He was like, he was always going on a brilliant digression, and he said something about lyric complicity, and I was like, wait, is that a thing? Did you invent that? What are you talking about? Because I thought it was so wonderful. And I think lyric complicity, I don't even know what it is exactly, except, maybe it is that kind of coming to know, that kind of intimacy with a little bit of mischief. Complicity suggests a slight bit of mischief, um,
Totally.
like a
I feel
mischievous solidarity in poetry.
it's wild because I feel like that is what both of these books are trying to do. Um, where there is a sort of intimacy between the subjects, like you and Max, me and the nursing home workers, me and everyone I'm involved with in trying to put this book up to play on its feet. But then also, sort of after the fact, a real intimacy between the writer and the reader.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, and it's sort of being pulled in all of these wild directions. It does just feel really like a unique form where real people are held at every point of
Hmm.
connection, in this web.
Yes, and I think when I think about the phrase lyric complicity too, I go back to, I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was writing this long paper that I never finished that was about the lyric eye, the cell
Hmm.
in lyric poetry, and the idea that this eye, not like the eyeball, but like the person was in some crisis. Um, and I probably never finished it because it bored me to write about it. I mean, what interested me more was probably writing poetry or writing plays, but I was thinking about the solipsism of that confessional I in poetry, because lyric poetry traditionally is an I just blathering on and on about the self. Um, so, this other poet, as a joke, created personism as a movement. Now I'm going to forget the poet's name, but I can send it to you, Maddie, after the fact if it's of interest. But he said, the idea of personism is that it's born between two people instead of two pages. Uh, and so I think of that with stages, that it is between and among people.
I I think there is a dynamic with that we're touching on that also just makes me think of how strange and wonderful it is to be a playwright that also thinks about the page.
Mm-hmm.
um and in that it really gestures at real life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's but it is also, I mean, I feel so informed by your writing, Sarah, so this is a moment of real entanglement for me where I feel that my interest in that stages was deeply informed by reading your work at a young age and loving it so much and being so astonished that something that is in print can also really gesture at something that's supposed to come to life, but that it's complete still on the page. And I guess I wonder if for you, you almost think of this book, if you think of your book as kind of like a play, in any way, because I think one thing that came up for me while working on stages was that I felt so much better about writing in that form than writing a play that was meant to be performed. But it still felt like it was using all of my theatrical muscles.
Yeah, and I think Letters from Max probably will be a play at some point. I've been working on it a little bit. At first, I thought, oh, it's too intimate to play. I don't
Wow.
want another person to be embodying Max. That's weird. But the more I read out loud from it at readings, the more the dialogue of it, I would often have two readers. And I thought, oh, yes, it is a play. There's always two readers. It's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. But I also think in terms of how you see the page, and um, so interesting what you say about it's on the page, but it's gesturing towards something to come to life, but complete unto itself. I love that phrase, and I remember when you came into the classroom too. I thought, and when you applied to graduate school in playwriting, I thought, oh dear, this woman could do anything she wants. I mean, she could be a journalist. She could be an activist. She could, at 18, she had a book on the New York Times bestseller list. Why would she want to go into theater? Of all things, I think it's very
Still asking that question.
put it all together.
Yeah, that's so, maybe you said those words to me at age, 20, but I really wish I had heard them. Yeah, I feel like it's been such an intense 10-year journey of asking that question and kind of landing at stages, honestly, which is sort of a hybrid of all of those things. And maybe that's why it feels really right. Maybe right for the first time. But yeah,
And we have no theater now. I mean, I think that's the other thing to say. Theater is completely decimated. So it's interesting that you've landed on this book as a form, which is very holy to me because it is a record of being in process in a theater and a time when we can't do that. So it feels especially holy to return to the site of that. And life is long. You with knock on wood, with any luck, you might have 10 more incarnations as a writer of all kinds of genres. And I also, I think you're the first person who introduced me to Maggie Nelson's work. And we talked a lot about The Argonauts, which is also one of my favorite books that's such a hybrid form. And, we don't need to be so narrow in our thinking about genre.
it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, I've been really sitting with this line from the writer and activist Adrienne Marie Brown, who says something like, um, what you pay attention. I mean, this is a very deep idea, but I just heard it from her recently. What you pay attention to grows. And so instead of focusing on what's broken, what to critique, who to bring down, let's point our attention to what we want to cultivate and nourish. And I think there is a part of me that I'm trying to let go of that has spent so long being upset at theater and how rigid it seems and feels, and how I don't really know my place in it, and what am I doing? Is it a play? Why don't other people think it's a play? Is it performance art? What is it? Is it activism? And just I feel like, yeah, just hearing those words recently I know that it was actually, I think it was in reference to like, you know, the police state and whatever else. And I received it in that way, but also there was a part of me that was like, all right, Rachel, like, it's just time to not care anymore about genre and allegiance to a field or form, and to just go forth, especially as all of the fields are dying and reimagining themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, that the idea that what you give attention to grows, and both the monstrous, that when we feed our monsters, they grow very large. When we feed our children, they grow large too. And what do we want to feed and care for? And I also think about a writer like Sheila Heti, who's, she's a writer I think of when I think of your work and stages. I love Sheila. And it's interesting to think that she was a playwright and she kind of had it, with the theater. So she invented all these really interesting collaborations and forms, and found different audiences that way.
You know, I think you have this line about how former poets make great playwrights, and you talk about that with Max too. I feel like my favorite playwrights are playwrights who also sort of maybe don't necessarily leave the theater, but really have love affairs with other forms,
Yeah.
and what happens in those other forms. And I feel like that's part of why Letters from Max is so beautiful, because it has the logic of a play, and it's such a book. It's such an intimate experience, and I'm so excited to see it reincarnated. But yeah, I love Sheila Heti's work so much too, and I feel like Claudia Rankine, Don't Let Me Be Lonely.
Yeah.
Her genre defying work is so amazing to me, and I know she's also thinking about the theater. And so there is this constellation of writers who go between forms and maybe bring something of one world to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what I want to say to potential readers of stages is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of a new genre. This book is not just for theater lovers, it's for other kinds of readers as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I always want people to say about everything that I do.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. And also, this isn't just for theater people. I feel like I write things for a friend, and most of my friends don't care
Don't.
about theater. um, so yeah, I really
Isn't that always
appreciate
your
that.
favorite thing though, when someone's like, "Oh my God, I hate poetry, but I loved your poem," or "I hate the theater, but I had a really good time at your play." I always get very excited.
Yes, it's the best feedback. I mean, yeah, I feel like we want to be surprised and taken by surprise. Um, yes, yes. I want to come back, if it's okay to come back to one thing you said earlier, just about the process of readings that you did, because I mean, Zoom readings are really weird. Um, and I still haven't figured out how to do it in a way that's compelling. I've done like voice recordings because I find it very distracting for people to be looking at a face. And no one really wants to be on Zoom. But I guess I just wondered, for you with the reading experience, you said you had two people reading it, and just like, how did you land on that? Did you read both parts? I'm trying to remember. I think I went to a reading, but I blocked out the logistics. And I also wonder if you have advice.
Well, that's interesting. I'm trying to think. I think I usually would have someone read Max's voice. So I think one time one of his former professors, Timothy Donnelly from Columbia, read his voice. and I read my voice. One time, Mary Louise Parker read Max's voice, and I read my voice.
Oh, he would have loved that.
He would have loved that. She became obsessed with Max and his poetry. She felt just enraged that she'd never met him. I mean, I think it could be really fun to use actors in a stages reading to get some of the multivocal quality. But I also have I haven't, for some reason I've been busy when you've done your Zoom readings, but I've loved the idea of how you've presented them, that you've thought outside the box and sort of had people lie down and had it be relaxing and not Zoom as usual.
It might just be that readings in general are weird. And that because we both come from a theatrical tradition, hearing you talk, I'm thinking out loud a little bit, but that we have a certain kind of expectation for how dynamic it should be to read, but that books, I might be asking too much of a book, that like actually it's okay that it's not as dynamic as a play, that it's something else, but yeah, I think the actor question is interesting, and for anyone who's listening out there, I guess be on the lookout. It's really something to think through. It feels so intense when the words are based on a real person. I can't really imagine what that must have been like, Sarah, to hear it through someone else.
Well, what surprised me was that I was happy that there was a real body attached to Max's words. I mean, I thought it would be a violation, but actually I thought it was more life for these words, like embodied in an embodied way. And Max was such an embodied person, like he wasn't this kind of fragile, oh, my poem's in the air, but I'm just lying. He was like incredibly vivid and embodied and wrote about sex and sickness and the holes in the body. And he was super interested in the body. So in that sense, it ultimately made sense to me that there would be a body speaking the words.
I really like that. And I think one takeaway that I had from all of these conversations was how much people wanted to be witnessed, and but also how actually uncomfortable they were being interviewed and also performing. People had so much stage fright because it was so out of their wheelhouse. Like stage fright I have never seen before.
How did you help them?
I had to give the most unexpected pep talk. Like, I mean, these were our adults who have seen life and death, and I look up to them so profoundly. And in the 10 minutes before our show, like everyone just had this like total meltdown in a way that the dynamic totally shifted for a second, and everyone was like, and also I had printed everyone's scripts for them. It wasn't a memorized reading. But literally one person was like, I'm not going to remember how to read. I was like, you are going to remember how to read. You know how to read. And also, you don't have to be an actor. Like, you have to be you. And so you're already prepared. You have everything that you need. And people are here to support you, and they're not expecting a performance. And so you feel nervous, but you are exactly, you have it all. And I think that did reassure people. And I think, yeah, hearing you talk, I'm thinking about how I'm still so attached to those real people, and how there's an interview with a rabbi near the end of the book where he says, he's talking about this in reference to dying and aging, but he says, at every stage we have to reimagine ourselves. Otherwise we become bitter. And or there will always be this sort of resistance. And I feel like this book is so new, I'm still holding on to the reality of these people and this performance. And maybe there is a way to reimagine what it means for this book to be out so that their words can really be heard. And maybe what you're saying about Max applies here too, which is that some real truth of who they are can come out when there is another voice. Because
And if it's the right actor, I mean, I think that's part of it. You don't want an actor who feels overly performed, because what you're talking about too, when you were telling them, it's not, you don't want it to feel performative. You want it to feel like them. And there are actors who can do that. And some actors can't do that, but some actors can amplify other voices simply through the act of reading. And I always find that incredibly moving, actors who can get out of the way like that.
mm,
And I love what the rabbi said about stages, and the idea that the whole book is a play on, stage as theater, stage as, stages of life, stages of moving towards death, stages of grief. Um, and the idea that the rabbi said we have to keep reimagining in every stage of life or we'll get bitter. I always loved when I read Carl Jung on stages of life. In that book he has about sort of the pathologies of each decade. I thought,
hmm.
oh, individuals don't have to be neurotic. They could just be going through a stage, just like with kids, how comforting it is when you think, oh, it's
It's
just
not this way for forever. Oh, God, I hope not. I know. I just turned 30 and it was such a relief. I turned 30 about a month ago and I was like, the 20s, goodbye.
hi, happy birthday.
Thank you. Um, well, maybe I I know this conversation was supposed to be like 20 or 30 minutes and I feel like it's been more, even though it's also felt like a second. But yeah, I feel like I feel very grounded in this moment and this stage. um I really felt that reading your book, Sarah. I just want to say that like really all of the troubles of my neuroses just are totally gone after reading Letters from
Oh
Max,
my God.
because I am so I'm just in a feeling state and not in an analytic state, and things feel so much more clear in terms of what's important. And
Well, I think it's a beautiful way to end also with your birthday. And maybe before we end, is it okay if I tell the audience who you are in the book in Letters from Max, that tiny
oh
little
yeah, sure. Yeah.
in the first moments of the book, Max is giving this incredibly long discursive lecture on Philip Glass. Um, and he goes on for about an hour. And I say that one woman in the class seemed a little irked that a man was taking up an hour of class time, and that she was to become one of his very best friends. And that was you, was it not?
It was. I was so pissed. I was like, who's this dude? Come on. It was so like Yale dude. I was like, is there more of a Yale dude? There isn't. And I think that that's also what made Max and this book Max so lovable, and this book so fleshy and real, is that he was aware that he was also imperfect. And he was so honest about that. And I loved being surprised by him. I couldn't have been more surprised. What a lesson in first impressions and how little I knew.
Well, we're all wrestling with the fleshy imperfect.
Yeah,
And again,
that's such a good way to put it.
think that's one thing that people will really relate to in your book is watching you track that as this the velocity of a performance about to happen. There's no ticking clock like that, and you wrestling with the particularities of living, um, and wondering, as you go through it. It's really a beautiful book, and so happy just to get the chance to talk to you.
Same, Sarah. It's been really wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. I took notes in this conversation. You both said so many things that really struck me and I want to come back to. So really, thank you so much for taking the time today.
That's so cool. Did you get fleshy? What was the last thing Sarah said? I wanted to note that down.
I'm noting it down right now.
Okay, something about fleshy imperfection.
Yes. All right. Well, is there anything else you two want to say before we say our goodbyes? Any last thoughts?
I just hope my sound quality wasn't totally compromised by all the little comings and goings in my little
Totally fine.
domestic world here. But no.
I feel like it's very Sarah Ruhl. It's a part of it, have the Hope and Anna and phone, and I know, but in the best way. Like, it was a revelation to me when I think it was in your essays. I don't have time to write. You're like, what if the interruptions are life? So I love it. I want to say, Sarah and I texted about this, but yeah, I do want to say in a recorded way, I don't know how you can string this in, but however you can, Maddie, I do want to also just thank Max. I feel like Sarah, I think you said he's the third interlocutor here in this conversation. And in your book, you talk about how maybe we don't always get to speak with the dead, but there's a sense that they are listening. And I'm just thinking about that, and I feel like part of why this conversation has been so pleasurable and easy is that he is.
Yeah, I often have the sense that Max is listening, and I'm sure if he knew the two of us were talking, he would want to be part of that conversation, and I'm sure he found a way.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, I love that because it brings it all back to what you were saying about, a plot can be as simple as people coming to know. I feel like this whole conversation has been an example of that. And I feel like I've come to know both of you and Max through this just lovely hour. So I hope our listeners feel the same way as well. And thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.